year, Women's History Month is probably one of the most important months that we can possibly think about talking and listening and dealing with issues that have to do with women and the rights that we right now may or may not have in the future. And so the events are set up to be able to give you an opportunity to discuss those issues, to hear about things that you can get involved with, and to just sort of learn about what it's like to not only be living in this particular time, but perhaps also what the history of women's and women's issues have been throughout since the beginning of time. And so today's panel, I think, is particularly relevant, again, because of the issues that we are faced with. This panel is entitled Women Victim, Women Survivors, and deals with many of the issues of violence against women. And our first speaker will be Marcella Maggio from the Center for Community Solutions, and I have to tell you that I'm really proud to have been a part of the beginning of that organization, and I was there to help it get started all the way back in 1970, and it's still going on. And she is the prevention coordinator there, and she will be speaking on sexual assault and domestic violence. She'll be laying the foundation then for the rest of our speakers. And our next speaker, I guess we're doing in order. Okay, cool. is Marisa Ugarte, and she is the executive director of the Bilateral Safety Corridor Coalition. Working with San Diego, Mexico, and Latin America to stop human trafficking. And she will be primarily focusing in on the labor issues. Next, actually jump one, to Kim Berry-Jones. She's the program director for the Center for Justice and Reconciliation, and she will be talking about the issues of sex trafficking and how to stop sex trafficking and some of the other things that they're doing at Point Loma Nazarene. And then we have Crystal, who is a survivor of the sex trade, and I think she'll probably give you a pretty unique perspective on that we don't often hear about. So with that, I'm going to be sitting down. Each speaker will speak for about 15 minutes. There'll be time for questions at the end, so write down questions, because I think you'll have a lot of them. Thank you.
So my name is Marcella Maggio, and I have the privilege of working for Center for Community Solutions, CCS for short. For the last 6 years, I started as a volunteer, and a little bit about who we are. As Laurie had mentioned, we did start our program on the campus of SDSU, and it started out as a women's studies program. It is the first one in U.S. history to be started, and they just honored it this past Saturday, which is exciting. And like Laurie said, there are so many different things that they had brought to the county, and then initially, essentially to the United States, because of just working together and thinking about the community needs. So I really want everybody to understand that the focus of Center for Community Solutions is really to find solutions for the problems of violence and to end it. So even though it initially started as a women's studies program and its intention was about women, we do have services for all genders, and also we can see people as young as 12 years old without parental consent. But here is a little bit of what we do. So as you can see, we are all encompassing on really being there for the survivor. We have something available to them 24/7, starting with a hotline. And this hotline is not just open for the survivor themselves, because we know that if people have been affected by sexual assault and relationship violence, their partners and families and friends are also affected. So this is an anonymous phone call that you can make if you want to know for yourself, how can I help? What can I do as a friend, as a partner, help this person survive what has happened to them? We also have counseling services, as well as legal services. You know, if there's any need for any kind of temporary or permanent restraining orders, or if there is any involvement with family members. A lot of times people don't leave because of the fear of, you know, I have children and what's going to happen to my children? I haven't worked in a long time. There's all kinds of issues, so we can help survivors meet these needs. One of my favorite ones is advocacy. Advocacy is an extremely important role because of the fact that it's 100% there for the survivor. This person is a non-mandated reporter, and as I'm sure many of you are aware of, on campus, as much as your teachers and administrators want to help and be of service to you, the reality is that they are mandated reporters. And if they find out that you are going to harm someone else or be harmed by someone else, they need to report that because they want to help you. However, many times people who are in relationships aren't ready to get out for an array of reasons. So at CCS, we can help survivors who are still in the relationship and looking for ways to either get out or work it out without reporting that. They just tell you your rights, your resources, and they are basically your right-hand person, confidant during the entire duration of your needs. So whether that be a week, whether that be 5 years, you can check in with that advocate, and they can see people as young as 12 years old. Emergency shelters, we have 2 of them specifically for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. And we also have transitional housing, which many times is very much needed by survivors because of the impact of the abuse. And like I said, maybe I don't have a job, maybe I don't have legal status to be here. And so now, how am I going to return to life without any kind of income? And transitional housing really helps that. So what is domestic violence? It really is a pattern of assaults. It's not a one-time thing. Many times it could happen and start out as a one-time assault, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to continue. Domestic violence is between intimate partners. So even though the word domestic is in there and we think of home, it is not a violence that is about family or about, any kind of other relations that are going inside the home. It is specifically between intimate partners. Now, the thing with that, though, is that there can be an array of different relationships. So this could be my partner that I've been going on with for 10 years. This could be my partner that I've just been hooking up with for 10 days. This could be a person I just met 10 minutes ago, and now the date is over. I'm not feeling it. I want to get out, and this person is blowing up my phone. That is an intimate partner, and it still precludes inside the definition. But these are typically the different types of abuses that we see in a intimate partner relationship where there is unhealthy behaviors bordering on abusive. In our society, many times we have this mentality that if I am not being physically abused, I'm not being abused. It's okay. You know, it's not gotten that far or that bad. So I could kind of, stick it out and, just see what happens, love that person enough that it's going to be okay. But as you can see there are a lot of other ways that we can use our power to control another person. And that is basically what violence is. It is using my power to control another. So emotional, psychological, verbal. So these are put downs. And many times we kind of brush them off and we think, hey, it's, I'm being sarcastic, or I just had a bad day. And I almost have the right to belittle you because, hey, you know me, it's okay. But when we have this behavior over and over again, it starts to wear the person down. And especially women, because in our society, we are raised to believe that we need to cater to other people, we need to comfort them, and it's rude to not do those things. So many times we kind of put up with different abuses because that's what being a good partner means. That's what I have to do in order to show you that I love you. Another one that we overlook many times is economical. So this starts even very early on in a relationship. Let's just use, a heterosexual relationship just for an example. But in our society, again, it's this illusion that if I'm going to go out on a date, and let's say it is a man and a woman, who is typically the one expected to pay? The man. right? So we're already, one, putting that weight on an expectation on the other person, not seeing them as equal from the get-go. But then on the other hand, as a woman, because I am giving you that power, then many times I feel like I can't speak up because you are spending the money. So it's up to you. Whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go, it's okay. And little by little, I start to give my power over to you in these little, minute ways that now, when I don't get asked, hey, where do you want to go? What do you want to see? What do you want to do? Now I kind of feel like, hey, am I in this relationship? Do you see me? And it's not that they're bad people. It's just that our society is already kind of mapping out the expectations, and we buy into it. So the statistics for DV, and I know that Laurie had really wanted me to think globally as well. So this is national, but I did look at some of the statistics, and I apologize that it's not on the slide. However, the statistic is the same globally, that it is 1 out of 3 women who will be impacted from intimate partner violence, domestic violence. And as you can see there, we have broken it down into the different ethnicities. So there are definitely women who are more impacted by this type of violence, and a lot of that times it's because of the cultural expectations within those different demographics. So also, an impact of having domestic violence, it absolutely affects your health. Many times we can kind of say like, oh, you know what, it's okay, I'm just tired, or man, I have a really bad headache, I don't know what's going on, I might just be stressed. But think about where that stress comes from, that foundation of that stress. If I'm walking around on eggshells all the time, wondering, when are you gonna blow up next, and for what, and for how long, then it is absolutely impacting my health. Because I, instead of vocalizing and having an outlet and somebody to nurture my needs, I am instead internalizing it, putting it all on me. I'm a bad person. I'm worthless. I'm not a good partner because I can't help you. And then initially, I'm not helping us. So again, these expectations of women is that I have to be the compassionate one. I have to be the helper, but then who is here to help me many times? And as you can see there is an array of different illnesses that can happen over the course of time, because what happens many times? Number one, I'm catering to your needs above my own. So even though there's some kind of weirdness and maybe I'm not really using the restroom as often as I should be, I'm going to ignore it because it doesn't matter. Because all that matters is that you're not abusing me in this moment. Forget the fact that I'm probably abusing myself because I'm not listening to my own needs. I'm not listening to my own body and getting the help that I need because I'm so focused on helping you. So what is sexual assault? Basically, in a nutshell, it's any unwanted sexual contact that the other person did not consent to. So again, in our society, we kind of play this off a lot of times, and we look at it as being, well, if you're my partner, I'm allowed to just grab your hand. I'm allowed to just slap your butt. And I completely understand when you have it like that and you've communicated and felt comfortable enough that this is what we do in the relationship. But giving you an example of something so minor that starts young, it could be something that is uncomfortable to them and actually triggers them because of an incident that happened in the past. So here you are thinking you're being cute and cuddly with your partner, and you kind of try to tickle them in it a little bit, and then they freak out. You just think you're tickling them. What's the big deal? This is no problem. But if I've experienced any kind of sexual assault and isolation, feeling like I couldn't get away, feeling that, my emotions were not my own, my body was not my own, then I'm immediately going to react to this. It doesn't mean that you personally have done anything to hurt me, but you've absolutely triggered something within me. So compare it to like the Pillsbury Doughboy. Everybody knows him, right? We just you poke his little belly and he kind of giggles and it's all cute. This is the opposite effect. This is a poke that hurts, and it triggers all those emotions deep down inside that kind of tend to rise up but they have no real direction because maybe you are not the person who actually did the assault, but you're absolutely going to be affected from that assault as well. So many times, again, in our society, when we look at what sexual assault is on media, thinking about movies and TV shows, we see rape. We don't necessarily see sexual assault, or do we? We see sexual assault all the time in media, but the reality is that we don't talk about it. We dismiss it and think it's funny and kind of laugh it off. Case in point, anybody who's familiar with the Jersey Shore. So back in the day when Jersey Shore was going on, what's her face, little one? Why am I blanking on her name? Snooki, thank you. Snooki had then met her husband, okay? And she met him out in a club, and she was drinking, and she was having lots of fun with her friends, but she was clearly intoxicated to the point where she was stumbling as he walked her home. And yes, it's very gentlemanly, right? He's walking her home, he's making sure that she's going to be safe and such, but on that walk home, she literally doesn't even know his name. Okay? She doesn't know his name. She's basically walking with a stranger to her home and ends up taking him to the smash room, right? So now they're going to smash, but is that sexual assault? Because did he get her consent? Can you clearly get consent from someone who is intoxicated? The answer is absolutely no, you cannot. But guess what we did as a society? She's so hilarious. She didn't even remember his name the next morning. Of course not, because she probably didn't even really know where she was. And it doesn't mean that she didn't like him or possibly enjoy it or even have moments that she knew where she was. But the reality is that if she's intoxicated to the point where she's not remembering this person's name, she's not remembering where she lives, and she's having trouble walking and talking, intoxicated, no consent given. But in our society, we view rape as something very, very particular. We box it in, and when it doesn't look like that box, we dismiss it. And that's why a lot of things go unreported. I'll give you an example. Think about if you put on a movie or TV show. Number one, what time of day is rape happening? On movies and TV shows. Like, think about night. It's happening at nighttime, okay? Now, secondly, where is it happening? An alley, right? Somewhere dark and scary behind bushes. Third, who is it happening to? A woman. Who is it happening by? A man. What is her relationship? Strangers. That is the way the media sells it to you on a daily basis. But does that mean that it only happens at night? Absolutely not. It only happens in scary, shady places? Not at all. Only to women? It happens all the time. So really thinking about why we box it in and the statistics of why these things go unreported. So as you will see here, we do have numbers, but these are only of the assaults that are reported. So even though it says 1 in 5, if you see down below, it says 1 in 2 for other. And other is anything other than rape, okay? So kind of give you an example of some indicators of trauma. These are the things that survivors can experience. We're familiar with a lot of these things, but if we don't look at it as being what it is, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, then what we end up doing is kind of thinking that they're flighty, they're just, being weird. We dismiss it. Also, some common reactions. So like I talked about with the tickling thing, that could be real triggering for a person that ever felt confined. And it also happens to have long-term effects as well, as you can see. High-risk behavior. So basically, I don't care about myself, so I'm just going to put myself out there. If I was assaulted anyway, and basically people look at me as, as a pincushion, then whatever, at least somebody is seeing me. And that's many times what the survivor thinks about, is that I just want to be seen and heard, even if it's on your expectations. So the challenges of working with survivors is the reality of it. There could be sporadic memories, right? Again, it's that triggering thing. You could say or do something in their presence that you don't know that you said or did, Because many times survivors are not talking about this. 1 in 5, 1 in 2. That means that there are a good majority of women in here right now that have been affected. And how are your words and actions affecting them internally on a daily basis? So what can you do? First and foremost, it's believing them. It's validating their feelings. People essentially do not report relationship violence or sexual assault if it is not occurring. It is less than 5% of false reports, and that's nationwide. Less than 5%, okay? So if somebody is telling you that something is happening, number one, that it was absolutely courageous of them to come forward because of the stigma that is created amongst survivors. And secondly, they are trusting you with that information. The next thing you say determines their next step. And I speak from example of that because I myself was a survivor, and that is why I feel so passionate about coming back to CCS and giving back to the organization and the county that helped me so much. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer anything. And like I said, I have information on the side for any of the slides, and maybe you didn't get the details as quickly as you wanted.
We'll have questions
At the end? Perfect.
We'll have questions.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Okay, here we go. And then I'm going to go one more. This is who we are. So we, like they said, we work on preventing human trafficking in all of its forms. So basically what I'm going to tell you about this is that human trafficking is modern day slavery. And human trafficking can be for labor or for sex and labor. And it is a violation of human rights. Number one is the fourth violation of human rights, the right to be free. Most women and most men and most people that are enslaved is because of two reasons. Sometimes in women it's because of gender inequality and economic violence. And in men it's the same thing. When you get paid a salary in Mexico of $5 a day, you're going to try to make something better for the people that are with you. Are men enslaved? Yes, they are. So these are the three cases that we had. And one of the cases is called the Franklin case. Hello, here we go. This is a man case. 5 men were enslaved in a Franklin Street. These 5 men were taken every day to work by a chauffeur. They were enslaved in a house, underneath the house. They used the potty thing to do the potty, and they showered and bathed with a bucket. So finally this was denounced, and the Mexican consulate reported it to immigration, and the man and the woman that were enslaving these people got 10 years of federal prison. That means you don't get 1 day off. So these men had a lot of PTSD. We had to work with them. There were no place where we could put men, so we furnished the hotel, an apartment, had them in the apartment, and they got their T visas, And the amazing thing is that they are now married here. They reproduce like rabbits. They're very happy. I got a bunch of kids that they've had, the 4 of them, and one of the women was back and we wanted to go back to Mexico. So their conditions obviously were horrible. They didn't have money. They had forced documents, for threats, fear of deportation, and lured with false promises of work, etc. So then, where are they now? I told you they were happily married. Rosa's case. Now, Rosa was a maid that we rescued. And Rosa was rescued from a home where she was told that she could not leave because she would be deported by La Migra. So the one person that befriended her was the gardener, and the gardener was the one that made the call. So we called again, HSI, Homeland Security, and asked Homeland Security to please help us rescue this particular person. What you need to know is that she's 60 years old. So there's no age for trafficking. We have women both in labor and sex up to 40 and 50 years old. So being rescued her, we had many challenges ahead with her because of recovery and rehab for this legal assistance, battles of unpaid servitude, application for a T visa, temporary safe housing, and permanent housing. Well, we enrolled her in medical programs, therapy, ESL classes, employment, family communication and reunion, and ongoing updates. But the language and the disabilities and the challenges we faced with her was the language. She was over 50, fear of being independent. She had no working skills except cleaning. Her health was very poor, and she had never gone to the dentist. And she now has a T visa and applying for residence. Now, the one thing that we did do with Rosa was that we filed a civil lawsuit against the people who own some gas stations here. And they were Arab. So they had her enslaved, and we sued this particular family, and Rosa has more money than I do. We were able to get $70,000 on a civil lawsuit against these people. So Rosa was able to build a house in Puebla, Mexico. She doesn't need to work for a living, but she does. And so she works in a laundry room in a hotel, and she's very happy doing it because she can communicate and is no longer isolated with people. So this is an amazing thing. Then we had the Dubai case. Now this is a group of women that were brought from Dubai, and she was enslaved by the royal family of Dubai. How do you like them apples? And she worked 19 hours a day. She was never paid because they said that they would not pay in dollars, but when they got back to Dubai, they would pay her in their money, which would be a lot less. Even though they had signed a contract on an H-2 visa here, that they would pay the minimum wage. Well, this woman was not getting it. She worked 19 hours a day, and she was raped. She was physically abused. She escaped from Los Angeles and came to San Diego. No one wanted to investigate the case. Isn't that something? Law enforcement has a great difficulty investigating labor cases. It's very hard to approach. It's very hard to understand them. And now we have the Labor Department that has coming in, and it's been a great help on this. It's not a criticism, it's just completely different than a sex case. Sex case, you go to Backpage or whatever, you got them. But in here, and against the royal family, finally the FBI took it. And the amazing thing of that is that we didn't file a lawsuit or arrested the princess. So there was another bigger punishment to give. So 3 agencies, I'm not going to tell you which ones, got together and banned this woman of the royal family from ever coming back to the United States again. She was never given a reason why, because they had so much money that they could get so many good lawyers that this case could last years, and then, of course, lasting years was going to be devastating for the federal prosecutors, right? So what was better? To send her to prison or to imprison her in her own country and never being able to touch ground in the United States again? So that was one of our cases with that. And then we got her immigration papers, we got her everything. So with that said, we have now, and right now in our cases, and you must have heard something about it on TV, some of labor and sex cases, which are the massage parlors, right? They're both. So we had in previous times, and I'm going to give you the statistics so you know how bad massage parlors are. California is number 1 in the United States with clandestine massage parlors. Number 1. Number 3 of the towns is San Diego. Number 3, with 132 clandestine massage parlors run by the Asians. Is it organized crime? Yes, it is. And most of the victims that we had that are Chinese incurring a debt, and we're not talking a little debt. We're talking a big debt. We're talking about $7,000 to $10,000 that keep accruing interest. Who are the buyers? Our primary buyer of happy ending massages are the military in San Diego. How do you like them apples? So when they go in, the massage, you know, the girl is mandated to say, do you want a happy ending or not? And then, you know, the sting operations, when she takes the money and puts her in the bra to do the happy ending, she's happily arrested, and we are also taking care of the jobs. So, no buyers, no trafficking, right? But the Mexico and the United States is still looking for something really which makes the law of globalization and the law of offer and demand for cheap labor a biggie. So let's go to the United States and what they're doing to our kids or to our migrant workers. There was a movie called The Harvest. In that movie, Romo, the person, he passed away of Lyme disease, had already documented that in the United States, making your vegetables are 364,000 minor children. And these ones are not going to go on Pinocchio, you know, from the Washington Post for lying. This is real reality. These 136,000 or 60,000 people, the children, that work with their parents in the migrant camps so you can get cheap vegetables, cheap cauliflowers, cheap everything. So that's a form of exploitation. It's not exactly trafficking, but some of these people with their children are being exploited and trafficked here, even in San Diego. North County, you have strawberry fields, tomato fields, and all kinds of fields. If you put children to work after 5 o'clock, and that's what they do, some of them, is for one reason, because the Labor Department and everybody else in the US works from 9 to 5. So from 5 on, I can have children packing tomatoes. And the commitment to make a difference in this is really hard. Then we have another one, candy sales. How many of you have seen little kids in gas stations selling candy, and then there's a big dark van monitoring them? Their handler. Each van has a handler. And they come and sell the candy, and if you don't buy the candy, they'll extend their little hand and say, hey, can you please help me? I haven't made the quota of the candy. Can you give me money for gas? That's begging. Begging is part of labor trafficking, and is banned in the Trafficking in Persons Protect Act. On Wilberforce, which is the 2008 amendment, the United States noticed that we weren't doing enough for labor, and that over-sexualized United States was only thinking about sex. And we were missing the other part. We are missing the part of your children and my children being labor exploited. In the internet, also in modeling agencies. But the candy sales are dangerous and they are organized. And they need permits to have the children out there. And you can't work if you are under 15, I think it's 12 years old. So that's a very dangerous thing. Car washes. You have a lot of undocumented girls that go and clean and car wash and do that, and they get exploited and not paid. How about the people that stand in the entryways of the freeways and everywhere else that says, I'm a VA, I need help, and you see them like this, and they're all hungry and grubby? Are they begging for money? And who transports all these people into these exit signs? So we've been talking to law enforcement about, hey, this is begging, this is labor exploitation, and I don't care what NGO is doing it and for what reason. If they don't come with money, they don't eat and they don't get a bed. But it's so hard because they've been so instructed not to tell me anything or anybody that it's very difficult to bring to the law these people. But they are exploiting them. Then we have another one. We have another one. What about the physically and mentally challenged, who tell you that they get paid very little? Are they being exploited? Is every single agency that works with the disabled really giving them the capability, especially for those who have mental retardation? Are they really? If a person can sweep who is mentally challenged, guess what? They can get paid the minimum wage. Guess what's happening? They're not. And we exploit them. And we look the other way. And we never investigate. And we never say, you're wrong. What about Walmart? With hiring this cleaning company, and then when they found out that the company that had the contract with Walmart was enslaving and trafficking the people that were doing the janitorial services, Walmart said, I have nothing to do with this. I have nothing to do with this. It's them. Yes, but you were doing the cheap labor. You were paying for cheap labor, and you are cheap. So I don't buy anything in Walmart. I'm on strike. Nothing. Sometimes the girls have to go and buy in Walmart, but I will not do it. So what about the chocolate? What about the chocolate? You eat Hershey's and Nestle's. Do you know what happens when you eat that chocolate and you're buying it without regulations, which now they have started to have? Have you ever heard of a movie called The Dark Side of Chocolate? Okay, the cocoa beans. The cocoa beans in Africa, the children climb upstairs, get the cocoa bean, but they also fall and die. And Hershey's enslaved them, and so did Nestle. So finally there were some regulatory measures, but not enough. Not enough for these people. Not enough for these children. So once Africa got the gist of it, Nestle's and Hershey's decided to do something better. Let's go to Mexico. So now they're exploiting the cocoa beans in Mexico because, we're like Hopalong Cassidy, they think, and we don't have the regulations and we are catering to crime or not. That is the deal. If your cauliflower went one day without a Mexican, it's going to cost $13, or with a Guatemalan, or with whatever, with a Hmong or whoever. So you want cheap labor. You want cheap everything. That's what we're used to. We shop at Ross and we shop at grocery outlets because we don't shop at Macy's. We're waiting that Macy's closes so I can get a cheap deal. Right? So everything's cheap. And women are not cheap. And trust me, both labor and sex and the exploitation of women in this is horrific. And they get raped, they get abused, they get beaten, slapped, and die. So some of them actually drop on the tomato fields with insulation. and they just dump them. And then we have the narco drugs and the people who process them, the narco ranches, which are in Hermosillo, Sonora. And people drop like crazy because of consumerism. So enslaving in other countries is also comes from the consumerism of the US, whether you like it or not, and whether I like it or not. Okay? Chinese factories, your clothes that were from China, the coffee you drink, there is a slave behind it. And that's all I'm going to tell you. I want to thank you so much, and I hope that you get an idea that this is just as big or bigger, and I'm just going to end with the ILO number. The ILO number of people enslaved in labor in the world is 29 million. Not what David Bastone said about sex, okay? It's 29 million people labor enslaved, most of them women and children. The numbers of people sex trafficked in the world were disproved. So they are not the real numbers, there are other numbers out there of consideration with this. But we do have a great amount of people that are being enslaved in labor all over the world. Tapestries, you name it. Just be conscious of that. Okay? And thank you so much for having me.
I am the program director at the Center for Justice and Reconciliation at Point Loma Nazarene University, and my primary job there is to manage a program called the Beauty for Ashes Scholarship Fund. Beauty for Ashes Scholarship Fund is a scholarship that we developed for survivors of both labor and sex trafficking. We now have 4 full-time students at the university and 1 more confirmed for the fall. And so I spend my time helping raise money and awareness around the scholarship and around the issues of trafficking in our community. Marisa talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to just spend a second defining human trafficking for you. So human trafficking is defined by act plus means plus purpose. And by that we mean that a trafficker needs to commit 1 or more of the following acts: to recruit, transport, transfer, harbor, receive, give, or receive a benefit by means of violence, threats of violence, coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power, for the purpose of exploitation in one of these forms. So these are the pieces of the puzzle that have to fit together to define human trafficking. One of the things that we'll talk about a little bit more today is the difference between prostitution and trafficking. When I got involved in this work, actually less than 5 years ago, I really didn't understand that. I want to tell you a quick story about a friend of mine who was very interested in understanding human trafficking in our community. At that point, as I was just getting to know her, it was news to me. I've lived here in San Diego since 1986 when I came here to go to college. And I knew there was prostitution in our town, but I had no idea that there was human trafficking going on, because I thought human trafficking was something that just happened overseas. My friend DJ spent the night in a park one evening, sleeping under a bush. She was spending her time befriending some young people who hung out in this park. Homeless kids, some gang members, a pretty diverse group of people that she was attempting to befriend. She slept in a bush nearby another area of the park where a 13-year-old girl was raped repeatedly all night long. This was happening a mile away from my home, where my 13-year-old girl was lying in her bed looking at the plastic glow-in-the-dark stars on the roof, wondering if I was going to buy her a Justin Bieber ticket. And that really woke me up to the fact that this is real, it's happening in our town, and we need to do something about it. It's happening in all 50 states of the United States, both labor and sex trafficking. But it's particularly high in California. And unfortunately, San Diego has been designated as a hotspot by the FBI for the commercial sexual exploitation of children. Now, we are known around here as the town to come for vacation, right? Conventions, sunshine, surfing. being known as a hotspot for child sex trafficking is not something that I'm proud of or something that our community wants to be designated for. But what we've learned through some recent research is that a trafficker who is focusing on sex trafficking can actually earn up to $670,000 a year by exploiting as few as 4 children or other people. So let me give you a couple of statistics about San Diego. As we've talked about, as you heard from Marisa, both labor and sex trafficking are very common. There was a study that was done by a professor from San Diego State a few years ago that estimated 40,000 undocumented workers have actually also experienced labor trafficking during their work here. In our recent research that came out of Point Loma Nazarene University and the University of San Diego found that we believe we have between 3,400 and 8,100 victims of sex trafficking right here in our community this year. We determined that San Diego's underground sex economy is an $810 million annual economy. It's second only to drugs. And what we also found is that gangs are heavily involved in coordinating trafficking in our town. Like I mentioned, it's big business. We talk a lot about this. When we talk about demand, I hear our Chief Deputy DA Summer Steffen say very often that it's greed and demand that drive this business. It's big business to traffic in people and sell them for sex. We also found that all racial, ethnic, and cultural groups are involved. There is a misconception that pimps are black, and that is wrong. And our research actually was able to demonstrate to our area law enforcement that they were disproportionately putting their resources in gangs and trafficking onto the African American gangs. And it was really empowering and encouraging to watch our law enforcement start to shift and change the way they look at what's happening in our community. It shows you some of the power of research. And they have been, it was a tough conversation to have with them, but we really we've seen some movement around looking at the other gangs. I don't have time to get into all of the research, but our research showed that white gangs are actually more active in trafficking than any other gang, and that traffickers, or pimps as you would more oftenly hear them referred to, are more likely to be white than they are to be African American. And then the other thing that came out of our research that was really disturbing is that recruitment is actually happening in our schools. And I'm not just talking college campuses, I'm talking all the way down to middle school. So this is a little bit more on the research that I've talked about most of it already. There's a lot of numbers, and Marisa spoke to this beautifully. There's a lot of numbers floating around out there, and many of them are very inaccurate. One of the things people always want to know is how old are these victims. We found in San Diego the average age of entry is 16, which is a little bit older than you'll hear if you look at human trafficking, sex trafficking stats on a national basis. You'll more often see the number of 14. And we also found that female recruiters and facilitators are starting to be a growing feature in sex trafficking in our region. And again, like I mentioned, the high school and middle school campuses. We, in answer to this, are working right now, the university is working right now with the County Office of Education, Child Welfare Services, and San Diego Unified School District, and we have developed an awareness and prevention curriculum called No More that we are in the process of rolling out. We started in January. We're rolling that out to local schools to help kids understand that there actually is recruitment going on right around them. This slide, I just wanted to show you a little bit about what's happening to kind of bring it into focus. These are some of the law enforcement busts that have happened. The most recent one was just last month, or actually January, where 38 buyers and traffickers were arrested in a statewide operation that rescued 28 minors and 27 over the age of 18. What really woke the East County up to the issue of human trafficking was the December 14 case. That's where we found 22 gang members were indicted for participation in a cross-country ring that involved girls that had been recruited right out of East County middle and high schools, over 100 victims. That's when the community really woke up that this was happening right under our noses. So why San Diego? People primarily, when I talk to people, they think it's because we're a border town. What I'm actually finding, Marisa, you probably know more about this than I do, is that because there's more of a crackdown going on in San Diego, the sex industry, tourism industry in Tijuana is booming. And I've heard situations and cases of men talking to each other like they were going down to a bar to have a couple drinks, but actually they were crossing the border to buy sex because they're not going to get in trouble for it down there. Saying, come along, come with me, hey, we're going down to TJ this weekend. We actually went down with one of our survivors recently and walked through Zona Norte where she was trafficked at age 15. She's now one of the students at Point Loma. So there is some issue of being a border town, but we're actually exporting our buyers, in a lot of cases, down to Tijuana. But it's tourism, it's the military, it's agriculture. San Diego is also a hub for traffickers that move their victims between Phoenix, Vegas, San Diego, and trying to keep them on the move where they can't escape. So who is she? This is one young woman who was rescued in San Diego who was 19. She saw an average of 50 men per week and was required to bring in $7,000 a week for her pimp. You commonly see this branding where a pimp will brand the victim. It's part humiliation, part ownership. It is something that we see a lot. The law enforcement sees a lot when they're rescuing victims. This was her brand. But what I'd really like to do right now is introduce my very dear friend, Crystal Isle. Crystal is a senior at Point Loma Nazarene University, social work major. She's also a survivor of sex trafficking, and she is one of my dearest friends and somebody who inspires me every day to do the work I do, because she is thriving now as she is pursuing her education. And I'm sorry, that was a bad request without prior planning.
I tried really hard.
So what I want to do with the rest of our time, instead of me throwing stats at you, is to talk to Crystal and talk about what does it look like? What is the face of human trafficking in our community? So Crystal, can you tell us briefly what led you to being trafficked, and how old were you when it first started?
Okay. Well, that's a really complex question that I can kind of summarize briefly. Well, it all started with me with childhood sexual trauma, where I was raped by my stepfather in the summer between 2nd and 3rd grade for the entire summer when my mom was at work, and then once you've been sexually assaulted as a child, you become I became hypersexual because my body had been activated. It's just a natural response. And the vulnerability is it's very clear to predators. They just know. And so, and my second husband was my first trafficker. We've been married quite some time, like 5 years, 6 years. And he would not only make me, he labor and sexual traffic me. He made me drive kilos of cocaine from Hollywood to San Diego a couple times a month for a couple of years. And I don't know if any of you have done that, but it takes years off of your life driving 4.4 pounds of coke, and knowing that you can go to jail and you're going to take the rap, and I didn't want to do it, but he was involved with the Mexican mafia, and I had to. And he would also do sex traffic me as well. I don't really want to get into details. I was in that relationship for 8 years. He wouldn't let me leave because of his affiliation with the Mexican mafia, but I was pretty witty and flirted with the boss, and I called him up one day and I asked him, could I leave? And he said, if you leave right now, today, you'll be fine. And I moved to Arizona and got away from him. He followed me, but we divorced. So, and then my sister, she actually received the same sort of abuse as a child, and she committed suicide right after I moved to Arizona. So I went like on a downward spiral. Moved back to San Diego and was renegading for a bit, which is where you just basically, you're a prostitute. Not a prostitute, you're a victim of paid rape. Because if you don't want to have sex with somebody and you do it for money, it means you're getting raped and you're getting paid for it. So when you see people out there on the streets, I would look at them with compassionate eyes, not with eyes like they have a morality of a default in their morality, because it's really big rape. And they're not doing it because they want to, they're doing it because they have to, and they've probably been a victim their whole life, like I have.
So
like I was.
let me ask you, Crystal, did buyers ever ask you if you were being forced?
No.
They didn't want to know?
Yeah, well, see, a lot of people like to separate human trafficking and prostitution.
So explain that to us.
Yeah, and there really is no, I need to position one. I'm sorry. There is no separating it, because it's like a pretzel. You go in and out. Like, I was renegading, and then my boyfriend would, I need a boyfriend. Of course, he had to be a drug dealer, because I numbed out quite a bit. I was an addict for 16 years. And then he would be like, oh, we had to pay for the room. Babe, you just got to go out, just one day. And so that's trafficking. It's Romeo pimp, so. And then somebody would throw me in a car and take me to a hotel and lock me in there for a couple of weeks, and then I'm pretty witty, I can escape. But then I had no money, had nowhere to go, because there's zero resources, right? So, so it intertwines, it just, there's no separating them, because they're too closely interconnected. There is a difference between them, but they go together. So it's not something that you can separate.
So how would it have mattered to you if somebody had asked you? I know it's kind of ridiculous to think that somebody that's going to be buying sex from a human being would take the time to ask them, are you being forced to do this? But how would that have mattered to you if one of your Johns had said, hey, are you here by choice, or are you being forced?
I think it would have made me possibly, because I was always really loaded. You have to be to do that kind of thing. I think it would have actually made me acknowledge the fact that I was a victim, because not one time until I got out of the life did I ever think I was a victim. I thought that it was doing it by my choice. I thought that guy was my boyfriend, or that's my husband, we lived together, he pays all my bills, and I had to have the drugs, because I had besides the sexual abuse, there was a lot of neglect, and there was incest, and there was, just a variety of victimization as a child, which led up to me being a victim as an adult. So I maybe would have acknowledged the fact that, hey, wait, maybe I am forced into doing this, and maybe because many of the women out there, and men and children, do not recognize or do not identify as victims, and that's one of the main problems. So the numbers you see, all the numbers you've seen are way low. There's a lot of people out there that are way too smart to get caught. I know them.
Stay here, because we're going to keep talking. But I just want to point this slide out. This came from the study, and I think it's really important to note that it's happening everywhere. We talked to 20 high schools. We actually got to go into the schools, talk to principals, administrators, and staff, and ask them, have you had any cases of human trafficking in your student body, or do you have any awareness of human trafficking going on with any of your students? And these high schools were all over the county, from north, south, east, and central. And every single high school had cases. So it's really happening, which is what's driving us to try to push our No More curriculum out as quickly and as thoroughly as we can. But you see a big concentration. We through our research got to talk to many victims after they had been arrested, and were given the option of going into a diversion program. So that's an important number. But this is where I want to keep talking, Crystal, and that is, who are the traffickers? These are actually people who were arrested for pimping out women and men. They are traffickers. And what do you notice about them? What do they have in common? They're humans, right? Male, female, black, white, brown. The first woman that I had the honor of mentoring, who was a survivor in one of our local safe houses, was pimped out by a woman, which really surprised me. And she started by panhandling. So she panhandled for this woman and then was ultimately trafficked. And it was completely through manipulation. This woman who was trafficked was the wife of a Marine at Camp Pendleton, who he had met when he was stationed in Japan, brought her back here. She had no family here. She had some mental health issues and became super vulnerable. When they started fighting and he kicked her out, she became homeless, which is when she got picked up by this pimp, started panhandling. Ultimately, her 2 little girls were used as the device to manipulate her because the pimp was taking her to see them. And then when she started trafficking her, that became the hammer that she used to get her to continue, because all she had to do was report that this young woman was selling herself, and she would lose the rights to her little girls. So you can see how complicated and layered it is. So you talked a little bit, which is always surprising. Your first trafficker was your husband, not something people would normally think. And you've already answered this mostly, but what I really think is important, Crystal, is the way you talk about the pretzel and the in and out between what Crystal calls renegade, which you might define that more as somebody who's a prostitute by choice. Find me someone who's actually doing prostitution by choice. So talk a little about who, like from your experience, who are the traffickers out there?
Well, I've never had a trafficker that was anything other than white, personally. And most of the traffickers I knew were white males and white females. So, I'm sorry, when I talk right now. But they can be there's different kinds. There's gorilla pimps and there's Romeo pimps. And there's there's a mirage of other kinds, but those are the 2 primary kinds. Ones that'll throw you in a car and stick needles in your arms until you're addicted to heroin, and then put you out on the street and then beat you up and scare you and terrify you and threaten to kill you and your family if you leave.
And that's what we see in the media, really, right?
That's all we really see. Yeah. But then there's the ones like my boyfriend, Chris. We were together for like 3 years. We sold drugs and but when we couldn't re-up, it was like, okay, can you go? I'll sit out there with you, and we'll just make enough money to pay for a quarter ounce, and then we'll be back on our feet. And that's called trafficking, because I didn't want to do it. He's my boyfriend. Why would he sell me? Why would he want me to go out there and do that? And I felt like he loved me. So, and again, I didn't feel like a victim. It was a romantic relationship. He didn't have about any other girls. He wasn't selling anybody else but me. But a lot of Romeo pimps do have multiple women, and they create a family situation where it's like they're my folks, So it gets really complex, and again, in order to identify as victims, they're like partners. They're like, this is my partner, it's really complex. Yeah. So the pimp could be anybody. It could be somebody's parent. I know a lot of survivors whose parents sold them. I actually know one whose parents sold her into pornography at the age of 2. And if you don't know, that people that buy children, they don't buy them because they want them to have pleasure. They buy them because they'd like to see them in pain. And she explained that to me very vividly, and it was really, really sad. And another thing that a child welfare worker told me about was that you can actually order a child over the internet for faster than you can order a pizza and have it delivered to your house. So. Yeah.
And I know there was recently somebody, a man who was, I believe he was like a seminary student that came from out of town and had arranged to buy a child in Tijuana, and somebody got involved and started talking to law enforcement, and they were able to arrest him when he landed here in San Diego to catch a plane to cross the border into Tijuana. And he, just the intent of what he was going to do on the other side of our border was enough for law enforcement to then charge him with child sex buying. So this slide, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this, Crystal, about where are they being recruited. I'm not sure why this fell off of my presentation, but there was a place on here that I used to always bring out to people because it was shocking, but it came up in our research, and that was we had churches on here. Because we actually found in our research that there were people being recruited out of these groups. But you can see here the diversity of where recruitment is happening.
Yeah. Okay, well, the nature of the person who actually will traffic somebody is a very cunning, powerful person. And they have personalities that are charming, they're sociopathic, sort of speak. I mean, they're very, very intelligent. They can sense your vulnerability. So they sit at the malls. They sit across the street in their car at the school, and they look for the kids that are holding their head down when they're walking home by themselves with no friends. And then they see where they go to a home in a not so nice area. And then they hit them up with like, hey, I hope I get some shoes, man. Those shoes are really, those are tore up, come with me. And that, all they want is some attention. Maybe they're severely neglected. I used to do groups at Volinsky Center, which is it's like the first stop for a child that's been removed. We called it the Freedom Group. And it was for at-risk 13 to 18-year-old females. And there is a ton of recruiting in group homes. And a pimp will send an underage girl in saying she's homeless. She'll come in and he'll say, I want an Asian girl, I want 2 black girls, and I want a white girl. And they go AWOL, and they can't stop them. So that's, to me, that's like the worst breach of trust that you can possibly do. And bus stops and homeless and LGBTQ, highly at risk.
Great. So we're going to wrap up, and I think we'll have a few minutes then for some questions. But what do you do? And that's something I love that Crystal always says, is now that you know, you can't pretend you don't know. I would encourage all of you to put this phone number into your cell phone and not be afraid to use it. That's what it's for. You can have just something that just doesn't seem right to you. It could be something you see going on at the mall. It could be someone that you see somewhere else, and it just doesn't seem right. Do something about it. You can also text the number Be Free for information. These are both 24/7. It's the national hotline number actually runs through an organization, 211 here in San Diego. I know Marisa gets a lot, and Marisa gets many of the calls that come through the hotline, and she's our.
And we have a hotline, which is 619-666-2757. That's the local one, and we.
So you don't go through that.
When they revert the calls to you?
Yeah.
So that's what I say. Once you have the information that we have just given you, as students and as young, bright minds, you are now responsible for it. So just take it and put it in your mind that if you suspect something, you see a child who is really withdrawn, or you now are personally responsible for as a human to do whatever you can to try to help that child or woman or man. Yeah, I think what would have been best for me is if I would have been removed from my home. Like if CWS would have gotten involved and noticed, because it was obvious. A lot of the things that were happening to me, I was severely neglected. So I mean, it was obvious. I got bit by a dog once, and I had a pit bull locked its jaw on my leg, and they just sent me home from school. They didn't even think anything about it. But if they would have intervened, somebody would have called. I think that I would have, or if somebody would have stopped when I was working, or when I was out. That's not working. When I was being paid for rape, and asked me like, "Hey, do you want to be doing this? Is this the life that you really want?" If somebody would have had some compassion for me and talked to me, I think that I might have been able to turn it around. But definitely therapy. Therapy would have been the best.
Well, I have several questions, but I'll start with, I live in Pacific Beach, and this happened maybe last summer. I was walking down the sidewalk, and I saw this young man, and he was coercing this woman who was so out of it on drugs, forcing her to walk down the sidewalk, and she could hardly stand at all. And I spoke up for her, and I said, "What are you doing to her?" And he scolded me, "Mind your own business," and all this kind of thing. I don't know what was going on, but she was totally out of it. And what should I do in something like that? Should I call 211? Is it 911? 911.
In that situation, I'd say 911.
Yeah. And that number.
And I see all kinds of things happening on the beach.
Yeah.
that are
Oh, yeah.
strange. And another thing is, the other day on the internet, there was this service to find out, I didn't know it was a service, to find out who are the pedophiles in your neighborhood. And he went through all these page after page after page, and then they wanted your credit card number. And of course, and then I just closed it. But what is that about? Have you seen something like that?
I know there are databases where you can look up convicted sex offenders. They have to report where they live. So I know there are ways that you can look up and find out who's living in your
It's a
neighborhood.
free service.
Yeah, it's free.
I don't know why
And my last question is, I read years ago that major hotels get into sex trafficking. And do you know anything about that?
Well,
Like
you,
big chains.
you use hotel. No, I've never heard anything about that. It's cheap hotels, and a lot of people focus on hotels, and I know it's like there's hotels against trafficking and all that. It's cars as well, because oftentimes you don't have money to get a hotel. It's in the car. I've never heard of, and I'm pretty much well versed on this issue. I've been an activist for about 7 years.
But they're definitely complicit in a lot of ways, right? I think Marisa has something to say.
I like to extend on that. Yes, cheap hotels have one kind of sexual exploitation or human trafficking, like Easy 8, all of them. You also have them in the high-end hotels, and it is the concierge that takes care of it. So you can go in and say, I want an escort services. When you have an escort, the girl that does the escort, just to walk into a room, gets $300. Whatever else you do or whatever else happens, so that's the high end of the scope of the scope. Most of the people that want, to talk about how glamorous is, like Heidi Fleiss, for example, she made more business being the runner of a prostitution ring than herself. With most of the people that I had, the Barbie of human trafficking was one of my girls that I really cared for. Her name was Natasha Gersey. I'm going to give you an example of what happens in San Diego sometimes when you are so discriminatory. She was a Barbie. She's gorgeous. Because she was gorgeous, they didn't believe she was trafficked. She couldn't talk about her case because the FBI was looking into it. So I had her speaking, and somebody made a phone call and said, in this particular university, she's a fake and she's a fraud. 4 years later, I'm with America Most Wanted. Spider, her pimp, was arrested. Now you think that somebody healed in all this time between what happened. She called me up and she said, Marisa, can you call these two people that said to me, that I wasn't real, and tell them to F themselves? So I said, absolutely. So I called the first one, who had been working for Fox TV. I called her, and her name was Peggy Callahan. I'm not afraid to say it. I said, hello, Peggy. I got a message from Natasha. F you. What are you doing? I said, I'm catering to somebody. So what you need to understand, she used to earn about $4,000 a night. So there is obviously all kinds of exploitation and this kind of trafficking. The high end and the low end. The high end is called snow bunnies. And I've dealt with several of them, and I've helped several of them from Colombia, Venezuela, and obviously the US. So I just wanted to tell you, it's not just the cheap hotels, it's all the hotels.
There's a variety of curriculum out there, and there are all the local organizations. I know Marisa talks to schools all the time. Most of the local organizations talk to schools. The most organized effort right now in San Diego is the No More curriculum and a curriculum called Protect, which is coming out of Northern California. So there is an effort, but it's also difficult because you can't just take a curriculum into a school. You have to have gone in ahead of that curriculum and train the staff on how to respond. And that's critical because you're gonna surface issues, and if the staff doesn't know how to respond appropriately, then you can have a bigger problem on your hands. But there is actually a lot of coordination and cooperation right now to change that in San Diego.
San Diego Unified, right?
Yes.
My question might be similar to hers in the aspect of the internet type stuff. how would something like pornography in general, not just child, play into this? Because it seems to have some of the same criteria, but again, there's some level of consent, from the individuals participating versus the individuals paying, to actually view it. So how would that play into some of that? Because it seems like you could exploit people in the same way.
Yeah, I really would like to answer that because this has been my fight with human
It's
trafficking.
illegal on some
Yeah,
level, but
this
it's
is
still
it. Pornography, commercial sexual exploitation or trafficking of women involves pornography, prostitution, child sexual tourism or sex tourism, and obviously child trafficking or trafficking. It's not just the prostitution. So you're right. Everything crisscrosses. We're a tourist town. We have pornography. We have the prostitution, and you have the child trafficking to other states. So basically, if you only take one piece of the pie, you're missing the other three. And that to me is very important. That people get that commercial sexual exploitation, according to Dr. Richard Estes from the U of Pennsylvania, and Sharon Cooper, who is the guru, claim and say that commercial sexual exploitation crisscrosses everything, including pornography.
I would really recommend that the college men look at something called Fight the New Drug, which is an effort by college men that is talking about, let's talk about the use of pornography and how it leads to sex violence.
It sets a false expectation
Yeah.
of what really happens in real life, right? It will continue to, you know what I mean? It creates a toxic masculinity. It gives men the idea that this is what they can get and this is what they should expect in their relationships.
But it's
And when they
normalized.
don't get
That's
it,
what I was going to say.
Yeah, my son did a survey on the campus of Chapman University, just north 100 miles, and his research study showed that 85% of the males on campus who did his survey used pornography once a week, and 35% of the females. It's normalized, but it's absolutely a slippery slope towards buying sex.
And it seems like a gateway.
Yeah, it's a
your
gateway.
girlfriend won't
Thinking
do
that
that.
is normal.
So you go and you buy it.
Right there.
She has a question. You tell her.
So as we saw in statistics, sex trafficking and child abuse is happening worldwide every day. And it was, some cases result in suicide. What was like that hope? What was that light at the end of the tunnel for you?
Oh, it was well, you see, that's a very good question because right now here in San Diego, they say we have 3,000 to 11,000 victims per year, but those are only the ones that come in contact with law enforcement or ER rooms and stuff like that. That's under those. No, I know for a fact that there are people that don't get caught, and
Why did you have hope? What gave
oh
you
yeah,
hope?
and I was arrested in 2006, and I was tired of going to jail. So I got out of life and I went up and moved to San Francisco and I went to a year program called SAGE. And then I decided that that I was worth more than that. It kind of taught me that. But really there's nothing here in San Diego, so anybody who wants to get out, there's 28 beds for 11,000 victims. And no beds for women with children, and a lot of them have children.
No beds for
LGBTQ.
there's
no tunnel.
no beds for men.
You know, you say there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Well, there's no tunnel.
No beds for minors.
Be resilient.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have something to live for. And I had a little boy, and I just didn't want to live that way anymore. And I went to a program that gave me a lot of therapy and taught me that I was a victim when I didn't even think I wasn't. And I'm the exception to the rule. There's the estimated lifespan is what, 8 years? 8 years, and then you die. Or yeah, and women just die of drug addiction, or they get beat to death, or killed by a John. I mean, there's really no way out, really, not yet. That's what we're
Everyone
trying to
I've met that's made it out and is at the place where Crystal is at, and all of the students at Petaluma are the most resilient women I've ever met in my life. You have to be.
That's why we're here, is because we want to create a society that offers a hand to these women and doesn't just look at them as dirty whores, I hate to put it that way, because that's not what they are, they're victims. And we need more resources.
Yes, ma'am.
I know you guys spoke about going to like high schools and going to middle schools and speaking about like trafficking and those aspects, but have you guys thought about like go, or do you guys go to elementary schools at all? It might be like
Yeah,
out of
they won't
bounds,
let
but
us
just
in
like you
there.
said,
Wouldn't that be wonderful? I know with Pinocchio, you're
Parent
trying.
training even, right? Like, let's
Yeah,
train some parents on this stuff.
Yeah, I had the opportunity of presenting Pinocchio, which was Pinocchio was trafficked. And in middle schools, what I have done is work on with the history and Underground Railroad as the modern Harriet, because I do have an emergency response shelter, and I do have an apartment, and I do have with the partnerships transitional housing. So whenever there's a victim,
Yeah.
they bring them to my home.
We hope we can get into the middle schools because high school is almost too late. It's
Yeah.
really tough though when you put the word sex into anything, the parents flip out. So.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say, because you yourself experienced it when you were at a young age. You said
Right.
2nd or 3rd grade, so it's
Yeah, oh yeah, if
like,
somebody had
so you don't
told,
know
gave me
what's
the
going
symptoms
on.
of a predator, and, you know, even though I had already been victimized, and told me what sexual abuse was, because I actually felt part of my abuse when I was a child. I thought that I was part of it, so I never felt like I was abused, right? So if somebody, if there was somebody to educate me
Well,
in
and like
childhood.
Child Welfare Services is now very involved.
Yeah.
And they're going to be key to reaching that group.
I think
And CCS, we do go out into the community. We talk about sexual assault and violence, and we start at kindergarten. We start about, my body belongs to me, really learning about autonomy, and I have rights to my body, and if somebody is trying to violate it in any way, thinking about the resources that they can speak to, even if it's a teacher, somebody that they can trust. So we are having these conversations, but she's absolutely right. If you put the word sex in it, they're closing doors.
Well, we are also training nursing students as well, because first point of contact is normally often the ER. So we decided that we were going to reach out to them, to the professors, and they've allowed us to do a significant amount of classes where we train them on trauma-informed services and the indicators. So we're trying.